be agreed. The Honourable Brian Walker.
Thank you, President. I rise, of course, in support of my colleague, the Honourable Sophia Mormont. I think I would like to give some perspective here from a medical practitioner, because I think we could all agree that allowing people onto a mine site while impaired at a high-risk profession is not a good idea. So if people are entering a mine site who are impaired but are not detected, then the risk we would have of accidents and indeed fatalities is heightened. And if that is not being recognised, then we ought to be cognizant of that, because action needs to be taken. Now, what we're seeing just now is opening up to public vision that this may in fact be the case. We don't know. Are they testing for impairment or not? Because quite clearly, if you're using one form of testing as a proxy for impairment and you fail to detect impairment, there may well be other areas where impairment is being missed. Anyone who suggests that risk should be increased should not have a place at this particular table. We need to have safety for our workers. We need to have an accurate measurement of impairment. Now, I note that part of the reason for Rio Tinto Zinc's approach is ascribed to their adherence to the current legislation in the Road Traffic Act, where the presence of measurable THC is equivalent to impairment. Now, we know, of course, this is entirely wrong. It's false. It's provably false. But yet it is being used as a measure of risk of impairment. They go even further and suggest that CBD is also to be refused because that might affect impairment. But by the same Road Traffic Acts, we're looking at driving with CBD. They tested individual drivers to see if CBD does cause impairment. Now, in medical terms, I would prescribe something like 10, 20, maybe 200 milligrams of CBD. They tested up to 1,500 milligrams of CBD and found no measurable impairment by the tests that the police were comfortable with. Zero impairment. And yet Rio Tinto Zinc is saying they may be impaired, we're going to stop CBD as well. It's almost as bad as Hong Kong, where they've banned CBD as being a narcotic, which is completely a lie. It's scientifically false. So Rio Tinto Zinc is not a small company. It's a very professionally managed company. It must be well managed. And so there has to be medical advice for this point of view. And indeed, they have sought medical advice. I wonder how much training has actually been done. Most doctors, you see, in this country have not learned about cannabis. The endocannabinoid system is not actually taught in medical schools. So you could argue that if you have not been trained in the endocannabinoid system, you are not actually competent to prescribe cannabis. You're not actually competent to discuss cannabis because you're unaware of the science. And only less than 5% of doctors prescribe. And of those 5%, some prescribe a lot, others hardly any at all. So I wonder if it's possible that the advice they have got has been from doctors who do not know about cannabis and do not prescribe cannabis. It's a question. I put it to the chamber here. Perhaps Rio Tinto, an honourable company, is receiving advice from people who may be less than qualified, maybe even completely unqualified. I would love to be in discussion with those advising doctors to see how much actually information do you have. And I could be very happy in my assumption that there may well be deficiencies in knowledge, which, if that is then passed on to a company like Rio Tinto Zinc, may in fact be causing harm. Is it possible that harm may be caused because of incompetent or inappropriate advice? Because if someone is suggesting that the testing of urine for the risk of impairment, if someone is seriously suggesting that, then they are seriously inaccurate, inadequate, and I would put it, incompetent. Is that a problem? Yes, it is a problem. Because then people are going to make their own choices to how they manage their own health problems, like, for example, their insomnia and the resulting tiredness. Are they not going to use medications which would assist with that, which might have more deleterious side effects? And as my colleague has pointed out, that is very well what is being done. In fact, as a result of the actions of Rio Tinto Zinc and other companies like that, we are now not only the state with the highest use of methamphetamine, we are the city with the most use of methamphetamine, a totally inappropriate drug, one which causes serious harm and ought to be despised at every level. And yet, We are allowing companies to take action which results in us becoming the recipients of a methamphetamine-addicted society, causing harm, physical harm to the individual and to society, and who then are able to enter the mine site cleared of any presence of drug, but who are actively impaired. Now, how do I know this? I know this because, as a doctor, I listen to people who work on site. This is evidence direct from the individual, passed on to me as prescribing doctor. And more evidence could be sought that when we give cannabis to people who have got, for example, insomnia or anxiety, we actually find that there is no impairment, and B, there is an enhancement of the capacity for physical and mental work. Their abilities to perform are enhanced, and yet they're described as incompetent for work. So the unintended consequences we have got from a company trying to follow the best advice, albeit the advice may be inappropriate or incompetent or just plainly wrong, is actually causing physical harm in the community and, more of importance to the political side here, financial consequences to society in loss of earnings, loss of revenue to the government, indeed loss of lives on site. I have approached unions to see if we can get some measure of action to protect the workers whose health is being improved. And I find that unions would like to work, but they're fighting against a company which has a large clout in our business here because of the funds they provide. Indeed, we look at the balance we have got here, the $6 billion, in no small amount derived from our mining communities. And it would be, I think, a careless government which threatened that because of the threat of economic sanctions being applied by the companies who want to control, albeit in an inappropriate manner. So what we are seeing here is the need for us as a parliament and for us as a people to rise in support, not just of safety on site, that people are allowed to work on site when not impaired and banned when they are impaired. But there's a deeper thing here as well. What we have is I, as a medical practitioner with a lot of experience, I would suggest that if people doubt that, they can simply chat to me behind the chair or chat to other experienced doctors, or indeed those who have studied the biochemistry and the biology and the biochemistry of cannabis and are able to give scientific answers which are represented internationally through a variety of studies. Ask us what the actual facts are. And then when our patients turn up on site, they are then dealt with as if they were inappropriately treated. The medical advice, the qualified, the experienced, the appropriate medical advice is being rejected by a company which is not medically qualified and advised by doctors who are possibly not medically competent to have an opinion about cannabis. Thereby, we as a parliament, if we are unable to take any action, we're basically tacitly saying that the company has the power to declare a qualified doctor's decisions and recommendations inappropriate. And I've yet to see a member of the board of Rio Tinto Zinc possessing anything in the way of medical qualifications. And I'd like very much to see that the quality of the doctors who are giving advice has been checked for their ability to actually hold their own in a debate with a doctor who is appropriately qualified and experienced in prescribing a healthy healing herb, which can, at times, used improperly, cause impairment. But used properly under medical direction enhances wellness, enhances their ability to work unimpaired, and whose opinion is now being overruled by red tape, by blind adherence to HR rules created by people who do not possess the information required.